All right, so I want to welcome everyone today to the webinar, Sites from the Ground Up, How to Rate Sustainable Landscapes. Again, I'm Sylvan Kaufman. I'm a member of the Chesapeake Conservation Landscaping Council. And this series, A Focus on Sustainability, is brought to you by 4 different organizations: CCLC, which is based in the Chesapeake Bay region, the Ecological Landscaping Association, ELA, in the northeastern United States, the Midwest Ecological Landscape Alliance, MELA, and Eco Landscape California. So it's a it's a whole country project to bring this webinar series to you. And we hope that these will expand our educational programs throughout the United States. And sometimes we even get people from abroad. Tonight, I am very pleased to introduce Lisa Cowan and CeCe Haydock. Lisa is a principal at Studio Verde in New England, where she's worked on numerous design and ecological restoration projects. And CeCe has worked on residential projects as well as on municipal parks and commercial sites. She's LEED certified, and she oversees the site certification for the Hempstead Plains Interpretive Center, which is under construction in Nassau County, New York. And tonight they're going to be discussing the Sustainable Sites Initiative and their experiences with certification. I just want to mention a couple technical things. If you have any questions for me, you can, or for the panelists rather, you can type in the questions box. And during a couple pauses, I will relay those questions to Lisa and CeCe. There will also be a couple of polls, interactive polls during this presentation. And under the attendees button, you can see who else is attending the webinar. And I believe you can also chat with individuals through the chat panel, but make sure you're chatting with individuals rather than the entire audience. So this webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be posted on the Ecological Landscaping Association's website within a few weeks, probably. And then the last thing I wanted to let you know about is that we have handouts for this presentation available at the ChesapeakeLandscape.org site, and I've just sent you the link, so you should be able to see that link now. It's ChesapeakeLandscape.org/event/focus sustainability webinar series. Okay, so I'm going to turn the presentation over to Lisa to get started.
Okay, is it showing up? Yes.
Yes.
Great. Okay, good evening, everyone. This is Lisa, and I welcome you all to this evening's webinar, Sites from the Ground Up, How to Rate Sustainable Landscapes. CeCe Haydock and I, we collaborated to bring you this webinar that we hope will give you a jump start on what promises to be what I like to call the next big thing in the landscape and site development industries. First, a little bit about how I and my company, Studio Verde, came to embrace sites in our practice. In a nutshell, I was practicing ecological and sustainable methodologies as a landscape architect in the early 1990s, and I was drawn to get involved in the ecological design field due to my lifelong interest in natural systems and finding ways to promote community engagement and stewardship in the natural world. So I was working on, at that time in the 90s, I was working on over 30, or had worked on over 30 wetland and upland restoration sites. And then when we moved further and I started my firm, and when I started to adapt those same low-impact ecological principles to our work on more traditional landscapes, we found that the clients saved money and were very happy with the aesthetics and the site performance. And in one case, we saved a client over $100,000 during construction and at least $20,000 each year after on reduced maintenance. But what we didn't have back then was a framework for talking about sustainable sites practices and, of course, the benefits, economic and others, of sustainability, and especially when it comes to, of course, sustainable sites practices. So we did a lot of internal research and discovered the Sustainable Sites Initiative back in 2006. And once we dove in, we became convinced that similar to LEED, the LEED rating system for green buildings, sites had the potential to transform how we all think, design, manage, and value outdoor areas. It brings together science and design and economics, which I find pretty exciting and really has become part of our mission and our practice. I'm going to hand the mic over to CeCe, who will talk about how she came to embrace sites, and she'll start with our webinar.
Thank you, Lisa, and that's fascinating for me. I've known you for a long time, and I never really knew how you came to sustainability and sites. And my route was a little different, and I know we can all remember the great jobs or projects that have been transformative in our careers, but I'm going to tell you about the design job that I did not get that was transformative. And I had been interested in recycling, very everyday sustainable things in my practice, but I wasn't that well versed in actual sustainable methodology. And I was asked by a civil engineering firm to join them in a presentation, a proposal for an interpretive park on Long Island where I live. And I came up with everything I could to make myself look like I had all the credentials. But truth be known, I really didn't have them. And the town supervisor of this particular town that owned the park property sent out an email, and I'm not sure I was supposed to see it, but I did. And it said, she doesn't have the proper credentials for sustainability interpretive design. So needless to say, I didn't get the job, but what it did was it jump-started me on a new direction in my career. And I said, to heck with that, I am not going to be turned down for a job because I didn't have the credentials. I decided to get my LEED AP because at the time sites was just beginning. And one day I saw a little tiny paragraph in our professional magazine asking for submissions for sustainable sites pilot projects. So I was working at that time pro bono with a small nature preserve on Long Island. We put together a package, we submitted it, and voila, we became a sites pilot project. So I'm happy to say that getting turned down was one of the best things that happened in my career, because I now feel as though I found my niche in landscape architecture, and I'm so happy to be a proponent, a spokesperson, and a partner with Lisa and other people on promoting Sustainable Sites Initiative. So the opening slide actually shows my pilot project, and it's basically the last remaining remnant of a prairie east of the Appalachian. Next, please. Lisa and I have put together this presentation specifically for the 4 groups that Sylvan has mentioned today, including ELA, which was who contacted us first. We are not site staff, but we have the privilege of working both with site staff and also the ASLA liaison. And so we've gotten some slides from ASLA, but we've also added our own. Next slide, please. So many of you, I know, have heard about the Sustainable Sites Initiative, or you wouldn't be on this call. But just to clarify exactly what it is, it's a national rating system for sustainable landscapes, and that includes design and construction and maintenance as well. And these projects can be with or without buildings. LEED focused on the building and left a large gap in the sustainable design world, and sites is filling that. Next, please. So we're going to start out with our first poll question. I'll turn it over to Sylvan.
So this poll question asks, what type of landscaping industry are you in? Are you an architect, designer, contractor, supplier, or other? So if you could please go ahead and check your box, and we will see what the results are. Looks like we have a lot of designers and landscape architects, and about 11% other, 13%. Okay, so So we've got about 41% architects, 54% designers, 11% contractors, 6% suppliers, and 11% others. So a really nice mix here. Now back, let's see. Okay, so back to you, Lisa.
So I'll be talking about some of the site's building blocks, concepts, guiding principles, and as part of our, continuing with our introduction of how sites came to be. So the sites, the Sustainable Sites Initiative embraced this report called the Brundtland Report, and they characterized it as a forward-looking definition of sustainability, which it was, back in 1987. And what this means is that a site or site development can be sustainable only in the long term if it addresses competing demands on three fronts. It is developed and managed for social equability, it is environmentally sound, and it is economically feasible. And often when I talk about this idea of sustainability, people refer to it as a triple bottom line of sustainability, or the three-legged stool of sustainability. And so that is one way to reference as you talk to people about, not just thinking about the bottom line of economics, that there is a triple bottom line that sustainability captures. So let's talk a little bit about the sustainability and what it means from an environmental standpoint, and this idea of ecosystem services. It really comes together in this slide, because what you're seeing here is that what we all know about the environment is that it provides goods and services, but that there is also an estimate, an economic value to these ecosystem services or goods and services that nature provides. So climate regulation, nutrient cycling, waste treatment, pollination, extracting raw materials, these all have economic value, and there's there's a total of, I think anywhere from 17 of these ecosystem services were quantified in the in the report that you see here by Costanza back again in 1997. And if that number isn't impressive enough as a combined value of what nature provides, the total global gross national product in 97 was only $18 trillion. So we get $33 trillion worth of services if our ecosystems are healthy. But that's where the rub is, as they say, therein lies the rub. We need to protect, we need to create ecosystem services or enhance them, and if we want to reap those benefits. And that doesn't necessarily happen when humans build things. So this slide just illustrates really the different, what ecosystems are provided to users, and of course flora and fauna in the environment in different scales and types of development. And it also shows us some of those ecosystem services and that we all depend on that support human life. So another good point that was made to me by one of the early founders of the site system was, you, like buildings, landscapes can waste resources, they can, conserve resources and that sort of thing. I mean, you can have a zero impact building, you could, create a landscape with minimal impacts. But there's also the better news is that landscapes and landscapes that are developed sustainably, they also have the added capacity to enhance and actually regenerate natural resources and ecosystem services. So a sustainable site not only can provide it, but it can improve on these services and improve, therefore, environmental quality. So that's pretty cool. I mean, we're in an industry that, is part of the solution, and we can not only minimize damage, but we can all improve environmental quality and that term, and, and make more resilient landscapes. Something that buildings and most engineer systems, they can do it in part, but they can't do it as fully as a landscape can. So this paradigm change or paradigm shift, it's important when we start to view sites and landscapes as not only just being places, pretty places to look at, or but that they also provide services that are valuable. And we can help ourselves and clients and the public to think of their yards their parks, and natural areas as high-performance landscapes, not just to be conserved, but designed and managed to provide a regenerative outcome. So the site's guiding principles are listed here. Again, what they used as they were starting to set up the rating system, and it was developed by committee members that spanned a variety of professional disciplines, agencies, and private individuals, and they came from also from the fields of science, of course, design, maintenance fields, and even suppliers. And they developed a series of principles to guide the development of the system, and these principles remain central to the core values of sites even today. Okay, I believe we have another poll question.
Okay, so our second question here is, have you looked at the site's website in detail or studied the 2009 benchmark guidelines and benchmarks publication? So we are rapidly getting answers here. It looks like it's going to be about 30% yes and 70% no. So there you can see the quick answer. And I will turn it back over to Lisa and CeCe.
Yep. Thank you, Sylvan. So CITES addresses these 5 major categories of site design and development. It takes those materials, vegetation, soil, water, and it actually organizes it organizes according to the site development process. But let me just reel back a little bit before we get into talk about the categories. Let's introduce the 2009 CITES Benchmark and Performance Guidelines, and we have it pictured here. So this is available as a download from the Sustainable Sites Initiative website, and it's obviously was developed in 2009 and released then, and they will be changing it. They will be going to version 2 or V2, but don't hesitate to go and look it up and even download it, because many of the, definitely the big core concepts and many of the credits are going to remain the same. So don't wait if you want to get started and you're anxious to learn more. Look at the 2009 benchmarks. We expect that V2 will, and I'm just going to guess here, will be coming out hopefully in the winter sometime. And just so dig in when you directly from the website, and it's free. The present guidelines, the 2009 guidelines, presently have 15 prerequisites that you must achieve in order to get credits. So you have to achieve all 15 prerequisites, and presently there are 51 credits. They begin under these categories, again, like I said, under it follows the design process. And so starting with, of course, site selection through construction, operations and maintenance, or O&M. And it also provides options for getting credits by monitoring site performance and using innovative techniques. The 2009 system works on a point system, as will the new the V2, but the present system is 250 points with levels of achievement or stars based on the percentage of that 250 points that you are able to achieve. 1 star is 100 points, up to 4 stars, which is a very high rating. Very difficult to achieve, but it would be you achieve 200 points under those credits. So I'm sure that many of you have heard, I know I have, complaints about rating systems and points and chasing the points and doing things that don't make sense. So I guess it's important to note here, or I would like to note here, that you don't have to go for certification to get the benefits of sites. You don't have to chase the points or try to go after accreditation. You can use this document as a guideline and reference document for doing any sustainable project, Sustainable Sites Project. So that should be encouraging. It's not just about the credits, it's about doing it right. And the sites gives you lots of materials to follow, and a framework to follow to get started. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So let's talk a little about sustainable sites and how it kind of dovetails with LEED. So the focus of the two, obviously LEED focuses on buildings, and site is of course landscape-centric. But they have been made, sites, although it followed kind of the LEED model for setting up the categories and the credits, it is purposely different. But they are also designed to complement each other, especially sites because it's coming in later. You can see that, of course, LEED focuses on the building, envelope and the interior, and it has less scope and detail on, site components or landscape components. It also focuses on, the building context or location and community patterns. So as we talked about further, sites talks about or focuses and concentrates on ecosystem services, and it is also more performance-based. At its start, it kind of took a cue from LEED, and hearing that, maybe it wasn't, why are we doing the things we're doing through LEED? Maybe we need to be doing more demonstrating that it's a worthwhile process or methodology that we're using. So, for instance, the LEED system will award a point for, putting up a green roof, but it won't even, acknowledge, or it doesn't have any sort of credit system that, requires people to demonstrate that it was a worthwhile endeavor or that it actually performed. With sites, the designer must demonstrate through modeling and documentation how a design credit will benefit ecosystem services in order to achieve that credit. Okay, looks like we have another poll.
All right, let's see. So our next question is, have you worked on documentation or site design credits for a LEED project? And we're getting lots of answers. And also, so as Lisa and CeCe are speaking, if you have any questions, please go ahead and type them into the question box, and I can relay those questions to them during our next little break. Okay, so it looks like about 14% of people have worked on LEEDs and 86% have not. Okay, so back to you.
So we're going to, CeCe and I'm going to start with the first two credit categories, and CeCe will take over after that. But this is, again, we're going back, we're going to do an individual, just an overview of each site's credit category, and give you, some examples of how you might apply them or how we've applied them in our work. If you want to orient yourself, just look at those green boxes, and you see site selection, pre-design assessment, and planning, and we're going to be including those on the slide. So as we're talking, you can look up at the top of the slide and say, oh, yeah, they're talking about site selection, or oh, yeah, they're talking about site design, material selection. So it might help you to stay, remember, where we are in this process. So the first sites rating system credit category is the site selection process, and you see here some of the guiding principles or some of the objectives of this credit category. And I think we can all acknowledge that obviously good site selection is important, if not critical, to any good project. And but often, many times, many of us will come to a project, the site has already been selected by a client, with or without a limited team, and then significant factors pop up that may have been overlooked during that selection process that could make or break the success, or whether you're going to achieve your objectives. So it is highly critical and important to get as much of a team in the room and looking at these sites, if that's at all possible, before the process, in order to be able to, especially someone who is on the team who is, if you're going for sites accreditation, who understands what credits you have and some of the prerequisites that you're going to need to meet. One more note, at least this is my personal opinion or personal professional opinion, it'll be easier to get site certification for a brownfield or a gray field, and by those terms I mean those sites that have previous sites impacts that could require or be enhanced through restoration, and it'll be easier to get credits for those projects than, say, a greenfield site that has no prior impacts. As sites strives to conserve or improve ecosystem services, it's going to be difficult to make the case that if you try to put, say, develop a large site that was a greenfield, that is a greenfield, it's going to be difficult to prove that you're not negatively impacting ecosystem services, much less, improving them. The second category, pre-design, assessment, and planning, is where you document a comprehensive site assessment and make decisions about creating and protecting critical vegetative buffers. It's also this opportunity, if you haven't done it up till now, is to engage that integrated team, the multidisciplinary team, which would not only include scientists, say, at this point, because you're doing, site assessments, and of course the designers, but you also at this point could be including representatives, say, from the construction team or the maintenance specialist. And it's also is where sites is encouraging people to bring in their potential stakeholders and site users, so you can anticipate what you need to respond to and what maybe they're looking for in the site objectives and mission. CeCe is going to continue now with the site design credit categories.
Thank you. As Lisa mentioned, the sites credits and prerequisites follow what would really be a normal design and construction process. And I'm going to talk about the site design credits. I'll start with them. The ones that particularly cover the 5 areas of focus of the Sustainable Sites Initiative, and that is water, soils and vegetation, materials, and human health and well-being. And these are the 5 important focus categories, and these 4 site design credits that I'm going to talk about, site design categories, will focus on those areas. The first one, and this is the 3rd section, site design water, has several credits. The prerequisite or the requirement to gain sites certification is to reduce potable water. This prerequisite was taken directly from LEED, and in the new V2 version, the percentage of potable water used for landscape irrigation has been reduced. So that gives a little more room for use of potable water. The credits are all have to do with wetlands, managing stormwater on site, and also what is particularly fun for landscape designers is to design a rainwater stormwater feature that acts as a landscape amenity. So this is where we can actually use our design experience, expertise, and creativity, next slide please, to create a stormwater, a landscape amenity. For instance, at the Queens Botanical Garden Visitors Center, near me in Queens, New York, part of the New York metropolitan area, is a perfect example of how this site used stormwater and actually gray water from the building to create a landscape amenity. The Queens Botanical Garden was one of the original case studies for sites. It's noted in the so-called Case for Sustainable Landscape, which is a more readable version, if you will, of the site's guidelines and benchmarks, and it really helps makes the case, makes us understand why we should follow the site's guidelines. So the Queens Botanical Garden was one of the very first case studies 4 sites. The building in the upper left is a LEED Platinum building, and right next to it, in the slide on the right, is a water feature, which is a combination of storm water and gray water from the building. And that water leads into a biofilter lower left, where the water is permeates into the ground, and the plant material, which I'll go into in a minute, helps evapotranspirate the water, and also to help cleanse the water. Next slide, please. Next slide, please.
Oops, sorry.
So I'm going to talk next category, which is the 4th category, site design, soil and vegetation, has a few more requirements or prerequisites. Pretty standard for us who've been working with ecological restoration. Control invasive plants on the site. That's pretty much a basic tenet for what we do. For my particular project, we have problems with invasives, so controlling them will be something we have to keep an eagle eye on. But also, do not use invasive plants. Particularly in my area, we have our cooperative extension has signified which plants should be on the do not sell nursery list. And another requirement is to create a soil management plan, which is also pretty standard in a lot of construction projects. But where we get points, the credits, there are several credits regarding soil and vegetation. Next slide, please. And the one I'm going to look at dovetails with the previous slide showing the Queen's Botanical Garden. You all are, I'm preaching to the choir, I know you use as many native plants as you can in your design. Personally, as a residential designer, I do also use as many native plants, but I can't always just use native plants. But at the Botanical Garden, there are plants that were particularly picked to act as biofilter plants that can survive in the wet conditions as well as dry conditions when the storm water is lessened and also when the gray water in the building is not as abundant. Next slide, please. The 5th category of the site design is material selection. As in LEED, the use of wood from threatened tree species or the lack or not using wood from threatened tree species is an absolute requirement. And once again, it's something that as stewards of the landscape we're cognizant of, and here it's a requirement. Some of the credits for instance, one that I find particularly interesting and thought-provoking, credit 5.3, design for deconstruction and disassembly, which means that instead of planning a site design where once the site needs to be disassembled, instead of having it go off into the landfill, plan to have it disassembled and recycled. Another credit that is a little more, I would say, intuitive, next slide please, is the use of recycled content material. And in a project near me in Brooklyn, one of the new parks, it's been labeled the largest park since Central Park to be built in New York, is in construction now. Parts of it have been completed, and it continues to have new sections added to it. I was at an excellent presentation by the project manager of this Brooklyn Bridge Park. This is Van Valkenburg and Associates. He explained to us how in a neighboring project, it's not even part of the construction of the Brooklyn Bridge Park, but it was the construction of the Long Island Railroad tunnel excavation. There was a massive amount of excavated stone, and this was carried very short distance. This didn't come from upstate New York or Pennsylvania. This came maybe a couple of city blocks. and that was used for compaction and drainage for the new park at Brooklyn Bridge Park. In addition, existing asphalt that was on the piers, this was a commercial center where ships actually offloaded their products, so there was piers, and you can see the remnants of some of the piers. If you look right in the middle of the slide, you'll see the tips of the piers. The wharfs, there was asphalt in the wharfs, and this was used to also for drainage on the site. And finally, a extinct wood, short-leaved yellow pine was used, that came from the wharfs as well, was used to create benches, which are now a site amenity. Next slide, please. The final category that I'm going to talk about, and then I'll turn it over to Lisa, is site design, human health, and well-being. And this is where we as landscape architects and designers can really shine. This is one of the first time that designers are part of the process of creating a truly sustainable and a educational landscape. There are no requirements for this section. Next slide, please. But promoting sustainable awareness and education, which was the area that tripped me up when I didn't get that project that I wanted for a nearby sustainable park. But this is where we can, as designers, we can educate the public in a friendly, in an attractive, in a well-designed way. And I was at a Arboretum in North Carolina a few years ago, and I saw this kiosk, which by my looking at it, I thought it was a very well-designed kiosk filled with educational material. Next slide, please. And in addition to the kiosk, as I walked through the site, there were bollards. Next slide, please. There were bollards which held plastic containers. That's perfect. Plastic containers with laminated sheets, which showed me, at that moment, I wanted to see ferns. I wanted to see particular type of ferns that were native to this area. And I could pick up a laminated sheet and guide myself around the Arboretum and find out the information I needed. So that's it. I'm going to now pass the mic to Lisa, and she's going to continue to talk about the categories.
Okay. The seventh category is about construction, and the overarching mission is to minimize the effects of construction-related activities. It does have a couple of prerequisites that talk about controlling, pollutants and restoring soils disturbed during construction. And what I've highlighted here is the idea of reusing or recycling vegetation, rocks, and soil materials during construction. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity here. I've seen too many times, I'm sure you all have as well, where something was carted off a site and then they had to bring something very similar that back in, or they had to repurchase materials that they probably had on site in the beginning. And so, but it also, by reusing or recycling vegetation, it also can very much add to the benefits or the site's performance if done correctly. So the example I was going to talk about here was a project that we worked on. It is the U.S. Customs Border Crossing Station in eastern Maine. This is far north Maine. It's actually obviously on the border with Canada, on the eastern border of Maine. And although it's not a sites project, it was a LEED project, and so that's a lot of all the federal buildings now, especially new construction, must get LEED certification. So there were a few places where they, for instance, they brought us in earlier because they knew it was a LEED project. And when I say they, it was a design-build team, and the contractor or the construction company was the lead. So in order to develop their own proposal, they brought us in early, which is usually not done, in order to get things right, and because they knew there was a lot at stake. So that was a good thing, because then what we were able to do was to talk to them early on and about site restoration. So to give you a little orientation on this project, the existing border crossing station is actually, you don't see it on this plan, but it occupied a very small area on the lower right-hand side in the green area. I mean, it was a trailer. And this new facility, has to be about 10 times the size. And it needed to be shoehorned into this site, which had a very steep slope, and there had to be lots of new roadways built, a driveway for an adjacent residential abutter who lived at the top of the slope. So there was a fair amount of site work. And the contractor, or the design-build team lead, got us involved and said, we need obviously to win the bid for this design-build contract, and we need to do it. So we need to do our landscape very cost-effectively. So there were requirements about re-landscaping things, but what we did do was propose that the slope, and the slope that you see, all the contour lines on the lower left-hand side is a slightly darker green area, that slope, that cut slope, be restored not using traditional practices of loam and seed, but where they would normally cut everything down, cart it off site, dispose of it, then import new screened loam, or maybe even the same loam, but it would come back in screened, and then somehow applying it on a 20-foot 2-to-1 slope. I don't know how they would do that, but they do it, and then seed it or plant it, and which can be a very expensive process. Then after that, they have to, normally the engineers or the contractor would be crossing their fingers that the loam would actually stick on that steep slope, not erode, and that it would vegetate, solely as a result of man-made efforts. And we decided that, we recommended another possibility or another alternative, and that was to we developed an environmentally sound, cost-effective way. It was that they would need to, as part of the earthwork process, they would clear the slopes, and they would cart off the trees because they could be used actually in another way locally, so that was a good thing. But the remaining woody debris that normally really gets carted off and disposed of, we recommended that it be, we call it woody debris, and that is, I want to go over what woody debris is. It was the stumps, the small logs, branches, roots, and propagules that were already on the site, and we proposed that they remain and mixed actually with any salvage loam that was taken off the site. So what they did was they ground this material through, we call it a stump grinder, and mixed it with, well, of course, there was already loam or topsoil in the mix, and then if there was any remaining topsoil, it would be mixed together and then reapplied to the slope. We also proposed an inexpensive native legume mix, which would perform better on this coarse, low nitrogen material. So we would get some green in the beginning, but we really didn't need it. That was actually to make it look good, so people wouldn't feel like there was a problem, that there wasn't vegetation on the slope. But this is a good mix, and this sort of mix really sticks to slopes. So in addition to doing that, sticking to the slope, it also inoculated the site. We were bringing back in all those materials that had been growing there originally, and all that organic matter that was there originally, and putting it back on and using it in a way that it would help the site revegetate and stay stable. And we would also be bringing back in those local forest species that were already adapted to the site. The next, second to last credit categories is operations and maintenance, or O&M, and here's some illustrations that talk about some of the illustrations and, of course, ideas on how we could be minimizing impacts and minimizing inputs during the operation and maintenance management of the site that we developed. So the one thing that I think is most promising, or not most promising, but engages me, is this idea that we're going to be reducing emissions, and what's not even mentioned here, noise on the site. We're by not having a lot of mechanized equipment, traditional equipment, we can reduce the emissions, and that could protect not only the site users but also the laborers that operate this maintenance equipment. And I believe here, CeCe, you're taking, oh, no, sorry, I have one more. And then the final category, last category, is the monitoring and innovation category, and this is the really, I believe, exciting category, because this talks about, and this is where we see that innovation and measurements or metrics to actually measure how a site is performing. So they talk about improving, the body of knowledge on site sustainability, but this is also going to help us demonstrate to our clients and to our communities that sustainable sites practices have real quantifiable benefits as we start to measure and monitor. Okay, CeCe, I think this is your slide next.
Thank you, Lisa. That is a summary of the original 9 sections or categories of the Sustainable Sites Initiative Guidelines and Benchmark. And just to remind you, you can download this. You don't have to buy anything. It's available on the Sustainable Sites website. I'm going to talk now about the pilot projects, the 150 pilot projects and the applications of sites. It ranges from the very largest industrial office parks, campuses, government complexes, down to small sites, residential, streetscapes, and small plazas. Next slide, please. These project applications are shown in the next slide. Next slide, please, which actually came from pilot projects that have been certified. And you can see the different type of site amenities as well as regenerative application. The center photograph is of a large corporate building, which is a lead building, but also the site around it has many features of the different categories that we just reviewed. Above the large building is a small garden, a maze from a residential site that was certified. And of course, lower left is a street infiltration pit. Next slide, please. The pilot projects were chosen to tweak the guidelines to help inform the site staff, the technology committees, the professionals who all provided input for all the different categories. These 150 pilot projects are spread around the United States, and there's even one in Iceland and in Spain. Next slide, please. As these pilot projects have been developed, there are, of those 150, there are 26 that to date have been certified. And it's very exciting to see the results, the individual results, the entrepreneurship, I would say, the progressive thinking, the problem solving that these 26 certified to date pilot projects have accomplished. And 2014 will see many more pilot projects, I hope including mine, that will receive certification. And after this year, then that will end officially end the pilot project phase, and we will go into a new phase of new accredited projects. Next slide, please. And I would recommend that if you're interested, and I did a little focusing on some of these certified pilot projects, and the write-ups are really interesting and they're varied. So pick one and take a look at it. You'll learn a lot. You'll learn a lot of not only about design and construction and sustainability, but also government regulations and the human element to projects that we all have to deal with. I'm going to talk about 3 certified pilot projects. We chose them for their geographic diversity, as well as the diversity of the type of project and also the monetary size. The first one we're going to look at is located at Cornell University. This is a very small project. It's less than 1/4 of an acre. The main library entrance is located at the agriculture quadrangle at Cornell, and it's next to the library. The building itself had undergone renovation and had left compacted soil that was inhospitable to all different plant life. So as incorporated into the curriculum was actually a class called Creating the Urban Eden, and this class produced this CITES pilot project. They actually began the project before the CITES guidelines and benchmarks were released, but it fit perfectly into what CITES was trying to accomplish. The class that oversaw this project not only did site assessment, design, plant selection, but as you can see in upper right, they actually went to work, got their hands dirty. They had to meet with the stakeholders, Cornell University, and for all those who've been to school or work at schools, you know there are many different layers of authority. So there was a certain amount of work that they had to do convincing the client. Cornell's pretty accepting of most of these methods, but convincing the client that this was a project that the university should take on. Next slide, please. The next project I'm going to talk about is at the other side of the country in California, in Santa Barbara, California. And I have to say, the more I read about this project, the more intriguing it became. It is to a very small site, approximately 1/4 acre. The price tag for the project is a little more than Cornell, $120,000. And this is a so-called infill project. There was existing on this site a building which was renovated, and that's the Victorian building you see in the main slide. And then 3 adobe condominiums were built on the site. And the derivation or the brainchild of this project was 3 couples who lived on large estates, and they wanted to fulfill a dream of aging in place, as they call it. So they wanted a site where they could grow old but experience the natural effects of the natural part of the estates that they lived on. This project had to pass 14 different government layers. And that to me, I have to deal with a few, but that to me was just an awesome undertaking. The lawn that you see in the slide was mandated, for instance, by the Historic Commission. But because this was a highly sustainable project and the team members were all as eager and committed to sustainability as they possibly could, they required that the turf require 75% less water than comparable turf grass. In addition, they made the decision that they were going to reduce the footprint for vehicle parking. Typically, it's 40% in Santa Barbara, and they reduced it to 5% because they wanted room for gardens, vegetable gardens. Lower right slide, you'll see there's a place for outdoor eating. So they actually helped educate Santa Barbara. This project that has successfully gained 2 stars is now a showcase for sustainability and is used for tours and as well as educating other government officials. Next slide, please. The granddaddy so far of the CITES pilot project that has received certification is located in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. This is not a terribly big site, a 3-acre site, but the price tag for the entire project is a whopping $15 million. This is the Phipps Center for Sustainable Landscape. It includes a LEED Platinum building, received the highest certification of any CITES pilot project at 4 stars or 200 points out of 250 points. And it's also a, excuse me, a participant in the Living Building Challenge. The site was, excuse me, the site was a former brownfield. It was used by the Pittsburgh Department of Public Works. And so the soil, the compaction, the leaking tanks that were found required great restoration. In addition to a 4,000 square foot lagoon, there are 3 water features. There's a 14,000 gallon rainwater harvesting and storage system. And soil microbes are injected into the irrigation system to help provide nutrients. This building is also used for, this building and project is used to monitor performance of rain gardens and green roofs. And it is open to the public if you're in the Pittsburgh area. It's highly recommended that you go visit this project. Next slide, please. So we're going to have our final poll question. I'll ask Sylvan to put it up.
Yes, and so this question is,
We've been given some...
Oh, sorry. What type of project might you use CITES for? And we do have a couple of questions that have come in, and one of them is very relevant to what you've just been talking about. Carol Becker would ask the question, she'd like suggestions for talking to municipalities that require non-sustainable practices that prevent the designer from getting points and creating a sustainable site. So what do you say to municipalities to convince them maybe to change their practices?
Elisa, I'll take this one. I would say go to the Sustainable Sites Initiative website, read about the Santa Barbara project, and it'll give you not only inspiration but some hints on how to convince the government officials that not only is this better for the environment, but it's also probably less expensive, will cause less impact on the green infrastructure system or the infrastructure system of the municipality. Most of all, become as well versed as you can in sustainable techniques so that you can talk with conviction. And Lisa's going to talk in a few minutes about the economic case to be made, which is always music to the ears of municipal fathers.
And then we had one other question. If you get site certification, will it contribute to the LEED credits for a project?
I'll take that one too. I don't know. Sites and LEED will be overseen by the same body, the GBCI, which is an organization that runs, takes the applications and judges whether or not they are worthy of certification. So at this point, I would say the answer is no. But LEED and CITES are not only is CITES modeled after LEED, but they are run by the same governing body, if you will, or the same group that's going to certify LEED will certify CITES. So it's a good question, and I think I would suggest that you make that suggestion to the GBCI.
Let me add something here to that question. I guess I want to clarify that they will actually, CITES will always be overseeing the credit systems. It's GBCI will be just kind of handling the paperwork. So it'll be up to CITES, and I know it's in their commitment to be coordinating with LEED, with the people that develop the LEED credits, to see where they could be coming together and complementing each other. So I think it's going to be happening more on the CITES and the USGBC level. and it's very confusing. But the other thing to also know is that the GBCI will be an impartial organization. I mean, they are a third-party rating system organization, and so this is, this system is administered separately from both sites and leads. So nobody can get, like, say, a favorite. You can't, like, know somebody at sites and then get your credits. It's definitely a third-party system, and therefore will get the recognition and that it's a trusted system.
Okay, and is there going to be a accreditation for sites professionals like there is for LEED's AP?
Lisa, you take that one.
Yeah, sure. Okay. There will be a credentialing system. Sorry, am I using credential versus certification? And I'm not really sure how it's going to be handled. That we're not there in the process of developing it for sure, and it will come out. It's one of their next things after releasing the V2 system, and that will be, again, I'm not sure if it's going to be handled under GBCI, but the Sustainable Sites Initiative people will develop, what will be required to get your accreditation.
Okay, and
that's
yeah, that's great.
Right on.
And then one other question that's not entirely, that's sort of related is that Michael Blackadder asks, except for short courses, seminars, etc., what educational programs are available for someone wanting to pursue ecological design as you are discussing? And I partially answered that question by mentioning some of the programs like George Washington University Sustainable Landscapes Program, Temple University, and Conway School of Design, but maybe you know of other programs that have a focus on ecological design that would cover the site's topics?
I know that colleges, universities are headed in this direction. So I would say any program, pretty much, many programs say if we go to a conference, you're seeing more and more of academic institutions, adjusting because they see this as something that's going to be very important to their students in pursuing more ecological or sustainable practices in their work. But so when it comes there are going to be more and more more formalized educational programs, and then I would also just encourage someone to collaborate, to find those professionals and collaborate as much as possible with people outside of your field that also have this interest, and you'll get, you'll learn from them, you'll complement them, you'll add to their work, they'll add to yours, and that's another way to get become educated.
Okay, great. And Liz Guthrie is participating in this, and she has posted her contact information. She's ASLA site staff, and she also mentions that the ASLA annual meeting offers a full-day technical workshop as well as the U.S. Green Building Council's Green Build Conference. And so then just to finish up our poll, the answer, people are going to be using might use sites for all types of projects, 70% residential, 42% commercial, 58% municipal public, and 52% institutional educational. So I'm going to turn it back over to you.
CeCe, I believe this is yours.
Lisa, you're up. Or I'm happy to talk about it, but
where to start? Okay.
Okay, I'll take it away. We've followed a lot of we've talked about a lot of this information. Naturally, go to the Sustainable Sites website. There's so much to learn there, and get together with your team and look at the second section, the site assessment. That's a really good place to start. I was talking to a fellow landscape architect today, and we're talking about a parking lot that we'd like to have as a sites project, and I sent him that information. And be sure that you know what the boundary is of your project, and that sometimes that's not self-evident. And finally, there is a scorecard which will be available, is in development for the version that's in development right now. So Lisa, do you want me to talk about the implementation?
No, I can do this, sorry. Yeah, sure, I can do this. Fine, thank you, CeCe. So the potential project certification paths are shown here, including, certification on the on the top there, certification for, achieving sites credits. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm missing certification for a standalone project, and getting this being the whole site system being a standalone system, both for project certification and professional training. And then the other path that possible options people might take is that the site system will influence existing rating systems and codes. We talked about that a little bit with that question about LEED, and that LEED will be informing sites, and sites will be informing LEED as they make their changes. And then, but the sites is also, as I mentioned earlier, they're promoting the use of the guidelines and principles without going for certification. So this is a great handbook and set of guidelines to help you incorporate sustainable sites practices in your work. So this is a slide that I developed a while ago when I was speaking with some people outside of the landscape profession, and I've used it several times since, because I think it helps us all to realize that sometimes we get focused on our own professions, but this is going to be transforming the land development industry, and that's one of the main really mission statements or main goals of sites, is to actually transform the entire industry, from design, to how we make and install materials, to operations and maintenance. So here's just some things I had gleaned from doing, my research on the site system. There'll be, an increase, obviously, under the design category. There'll be an increased emphasis on green features such as vegetative walls and vegetative roofs. If you skip down a little bit, as we incorporate things like food production in our landscapes, that provides community benefits. Under the materials category, as CeCe had focused on, and I also find it most just interesting category to dig into, is this idea of products being designed for deconstruction and disassembly and reuse in some way. There will be emphasis, of course, on certified materials and sustainably using, materials that have come from places where they were sustainably manufactured and grown. And then under O&M, there's going to be an emphasis on reducing greenhouse gases, things like using skilled labor, training site managers and laborers. Sorry, my things going off here. Site managers to incorporate new practices in their work, and so that therefore laborers will raise the bar on how people work and their skill levels. And then of course the idea of monitoring performance metrics on a site, and demonstrating not just to the for site certification, again, to our clients that these have real benefits. So I'm going to go into some slides on making the business case or economic case for sustainable sites practices. And there's the really good news is that there are lots of organizations out there, research, resource economics organizations, agencies that are doing even like academic organizations that are doing this sort of research to determine how to quantify benefits for sustainable practices. And I know that even CITES is headed in this direction to help give people a better sense of some real quantifiable benefits that we can share to help people understand them better and understand why it's not just a feel-good thing, but it actually is an economically good, cost-effective way to go. So we, in this case, because it's such recent research, focused on something that was just recently released by the Natural Resources Defense Council, or the NRDC, and it's called the Commercial Value of Green Infrastructure, and I reference it here below. And it was just released, I believe, in this month. And it includes dollar calculations for economic benefits of green infrastructure, but many of these green infrastructure practices, really dovetail nicely with the site system. So if you go on their website, if you look up that that study, you'll find several pages of graphics that look like this, and they took three types of scales of development. I believe one was a retail center, and in this case, an apartment building. And I thought we'd highlight this one because it has both residential and commercial applications, and might be a little more, people might be able to identify with a little more. And so a blow-up of their graphic here shows, what was done, what they studied, and I guess I should reel back a little bit and say that we can all find case studies and things that quote economic benefits, but but if you look at this one, what they tried to do is be more national, kind of in their reach. They didn't just limit it to a particular geographic area. That they did a really good job, especially this was noted by the person I work with, who's a resource economist, that to quantify those benefits in the most applicable way. So while they did have to make certain assumptions about the size of the green roof and how many trees are planted, they really tried to factor in different geographic factors that might raise or lower something and come up with something that they could defend. So in this case, they put up a green roof. They strategically planted trees around the building, and they included, the installation of bioswales and rain gardens. And on this next slide, you see that you can see more the size of the project. How big was the building, how many stories, what is the size of the roof, what are the units. But on the left-hand side there, you can see some real numbers that again were developed using data and accepted practices for developing these sorts of studies. And I think that this is something that could be potentially used by people like us as we're starting to talk, especially to clients in the business, and that are a little more sophisticated, or they have to justify this in their business. We can take studies like this and start to tease out what we think are potentially something that they might be interested in. For instance, of course, energy savings. In this case, they estimated close to $1,800 annually. But then also things like rental income, that people that there are studies that demonstrate that these places that use green infrastructure and are well designed and managed actually get higher rental incomes. I know that somebody quoted that LEED Platinum buildings get better rental incomes. So there's real market analysis that support these numbers here. And some of the bigger things to be thinking about in the future is that there may be stormwater fees being levied for a lot of impervious areas. So as the less pervious area, the more you put in and deal with your stormwater, the more likely your client will save money down the road if their stormwater utility comes into play in their community. So these are real economic benefits. This is not just a feel-good thing. And I think people are interested if we can make the case, that they're looking for us to make the case and see what we can do to work with these sorts of studies. So CeCe, were you going to take this one?
Yeah,
or
we're gonna wrap up. We talked about the development for sites training and education. It is hoped that there will be a national training course, and as was mentioned, Liz Guthrie, our inimitable sites liaison at ASLA, conducts wonderful workshops at both the ASLA conference and also Greenbuild conferences. And there will be individual sites and sustainability-related continuing ed programs, and of course, as mentioned, sites will be incorporated into academic programs. Next slide, please. I'm going to talk about resources that we have listed on the document that Sylvan mentioned. You can find it on the website address that she gave. Of course, number one, sustainablesites.org, and this is the home page. Next slide, please. And an offshoot of the Sustainable Sites Initiative is something called Landscape for Life. And if you're involved in residential work predominantly, this is really a very good tool. It's focused for residents. On a larger scale, lower right is a image of the White House's report, Guidance for Federal Agencies of Sustainable Landscapes. And this is also an in-depth document that's downloadable. Next slide, please. And in addition to those two resources, I'm particularly fond of New York City Parks on the left-hand side, High Performance Landscape Guidelines. And this has very detailed information on methods and methodologies. Mayor Bloomberg, I'm proud to say, was a great proponent of green infrastructure and environmental progressiveness in New York City. On the right-hand side is an image of a book that recently came out. It was written by one of the members who contributed a great deal of information, time, and effort to the site's guidelines, Meg Calkins. And so now Lisa's going to wrap up with a conclusion for our program.
So what can we do individually and together? And we, can become more educated. We can educate our clients. We need to collaborate with people outside of our profession, especially in the ecological industries, and get certified. And so there are organizations out there, just like ELA is now, and the other members on this webinar. The Americans collaborate with these organizations, attend seminars. American Society of Landscape Architects, as we stated, is doing a lot of work on this. I just happen to listen to the Society of Ecological Restoration because, again, they're focused on ecological restoration, and they'll be getting more, I'm sure, if not already very involved, will be promoting this in their own educational arenas. And one thing that I would like to encourage everybody to do is to choose a niche or your own, whatever your subject area of expertise that you are focused on now. Ask those hard questions and definitely participate in the site's public comment periods. There was just one last November. There'll be another one coming around in a few years, I'm assuming. And remember, this is a crowdsourced system, so if you participate, if we all participate and weigh in on our particular subject areas, our expertise areas, then we have the potential to move this system in the right direction, to respond to regional concerns, and to respond to professional concerns and whatever else we think is important to be included or taking out of the system. So I believe that's starting to wrap up. We've given the name of the Sustainable Sites Initiative website, and you can also email them directly for more information. And that concludes our presentation. Thank you all for taking the time to participate.
Thank you, Lisa and CeCe. We do have a couple of final questions from the participants. One question is, do you find that you have to bill your clients more for the time you spend coordinating site certification? And if so, do you have a ballpark for what the upcharge is? Or do you always find that the cost is mitigated by cost savings found when implementing sites practices? And that question comes from Emily Rogers.
Lisa, I'm going to let you tackle that. That's a good question.
It is a very good question, I must say. I would not assume that it is going to cost more, and part of that business and economic case that we need to make is by taking and paying the design and construction team, and paying more upfront to get the to do a project sustainably. Again, if you can demonstrate good case studies that they potentially could save money in construction significantly, and give some real case studies that help people understand, or of course long-term maintenance. It could really help people realize that it's a good investment.
And then that's great. And then the final question is, have some monitoring templates or guidelines been produced and made available?
Would you repeat that?
Have some monitoring templates or guidelines been produced and made available? Not exactly sure whether they mean. I mean, I know that the CITES guidelines are available, maybe specifically for monitoring.
CeCe, would you know? Have you looked in detail at the?
Yes. In the final section of the guidelines and benchmarks, there are specific monitoring methodologies, monitoring information, and it is there. I won't go into it because it's late, and but it's there.
Great. Well, I just want to thank everyone again for attending. That was a great presentation, and it has been recorded, and it will be available on the website within a couple weeks, hopefully, although ELA is having its conference February 25th and 6th, and so I think they've been a little bit behind on posting the recordings, but I'm sure they will get them up soon. And again, this webinar, all of our organizations are pretty much volunteer-based, and so if we have a donation button on the ELA website if anyone would like to donate some money to continue the webinars. We do have several more scheduled through April, so please sign up for the additional webinars, and we hope to be bringing you a whole nother set of webinars next year. So again, thanks for attending, and thank you, Lisa.